Hey, folks, welcome to a new episode of the Whiskey Ring Podcast. Today, I'm thrilled to be returning to the Southeast. What would you consider it? Southeast still?
South.
South. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, to the South to visit Arkansas, which we have never gone to before. And unlike when I was talking to my friends at Highwire, I made sure this time we have not gone to Arkansas before. So you are the first. I'm thrilled to welcome on Phil Brandon. He's the founder, distiller, idea man, if you will, many different titles at Rock Town Distillery in Little Rock, Arkansas. Phil, welcome on.
Oh, thanks. Glad to be here.
So Rocktown has been on my radar for several years now, even pre-COVID,
Oh,
as
wow.
somewhere I wanted to check into to taste your product. I've had a couple of people randomly in my life be like, yeah, this place in Arkansas, you should really check this out. And I know one person in Arkansas, so now I know two with you. So it's not like I've got a lot of traffic going there, but still, you just kept popping up as this place that was experimental, putting out good product, but also willing to explore. So with that, I'm just thrilled that we could finally make connection. And shout
Likewise.
out to as usual Nora and Adam at Lost Lantern for making another connection for us. So let's start right with the origin story. This is the first legal distillery in not just Little Rock, but all of Arkansas since before Prohibition. And it's including the fact Arkansas went dry 2 years before national prohibition. So we're talking 92 years or so between going down and 2010 when you were founded. As you said on Big Blend Radio in 2019, you had a lot of trails to blaze. So, just opening up to you, what would you say is the origin story for Rocktown?
Wow. Yeah. Well, I started Rocktown in 2010, which, people are like, first distillery in Arkansas, 2010. That seems like a long time. But yeah, it was 2010. Um, I had a passion for whiskey. I was a whiskey drinker. I wasn't a hobbyist in any sense of the word or anything like that. But I worked in corporate America for a telecom company called Alltel Wireless that was headquartered here in Little Rock. And in the corporate workings, they were being acquired by Verizon, and my job was going away. And I could either try to work in telecom and have to move to Atlanta or New Jersey, Basking Ridge, where Verizon was headquartered, or I could try to figure out something that I could do in Arkansas. And the more I looked, the more I couldn't find a corporate job. And all the while, I was drinking whiskey and studying whiskey and coming across different distilleries and going to the liquor store on Friday and buying a bottle that was on sale and taking it home and then Googling it once I got back to work to learn about how it was made, what made it special. So the science of it really appealed to me quite a bit. And so as discovery goes, you happen across another website, another article that mentions another distillery, and you check it out. And it turned out there was this craft distilling movement. I don't think it even had the name craft back then or was a movement. It was just a few small distilleries on the West Coast and a few small ones. There was Tuttletown in New York, and there was Dry Fly in Spokane, and St. George's in California, and it's like, wow, this could be a very interesting thing to try to do. I didn't, the idea of making craft beer didn't appeal to me, but the idea of actually making whiskey was like the spark that just, when an idea won't let you go, that's when you know that that's what you really have to do. And I was 46 at the time, a little bit late to be starting a new venture, a new company, but I said, screw corporate America. I'm going to do my own thing. And I put all my chips in the middle of the table and rolled the dice. And here we are, a little over 14 years later.
And it's really, I want to know too that when you were thinking about what you would have to do to maintain a job in communications, like you said, moving to Atlanta, New Jersey, anywhere else, you are not only a native Arkansan, so I say that I have that correctly,
Arkansas,
right?
yeah.
Arkansan, thank you. A native Arkansan, but you've got family ties there going back 4 or 5 generations.
Right.
So, this isn't a
Yeah.
place that you would just up and leave. You had roots there.
Right. Yeah. Like if I had moved to Little Rock to work for Alltel, then it wouldn't be that hard for me to move somewhere else.
Right,
But
right.
born and raised here, my wife was born and raised here. I had teenage kids. Our parents were both here. And then, yes, my mom's dad was born here, and it goes on back to where Arkansas ties are deep. And I just could not uproot my family at this stage of life and take them to a new city to start something else and be beholden to, you know, the man, so to speak, and um, you know, follow the whims of the stock market. So I decided to create my own path.
You said trails to blaze.
Yes.
Uh, or just I want to I'll follow up with that with going on to that craft movement. Because really early on in Rocktown's existence, this is October 2010. You did an interview with the local paper in Fayetteville where you were asked about the pending craft distillery renaissance. Like you said, there was a couple there. You mentioned Tuttletown and Dryfly, St. George. St. George, a recent guest on the podcast too. And you were maybe gone to from 50 distilleries to about 200 in just a decade, maybe half a decade, really. Uh, Clearly, we've got over 3,000 craft distilleries now across the US. That renaissance has occurred. That's more than occurred, I would
Absolutely.
say.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
so it's a completely different landscape than it was even 14 years ago or 15 when you were really thinking about this. Uh, Given that you founded this in the earlier stages of that craft movement, where do you feel that you and Rocktown fit in that renaissance?
Wow, that's a deep question. You know, it's interesting as I've watched my fellow distilleries that started around the same time, how the changes they've gone through, and you think of people like Few Spirits in Chicago or
Mhm.
Garrison down in Texas, who was couple years ahead of me, um, or somebody like um, some of these in the what I call the bigger markets have had a larger influence than maybe I've had. When you talk about Chicago and Illinois and all the people there, and Texas and all the people there, and California, and Arkansas is a small state. I mean, you weren't exactly sure where it was on the map. Is
Yeah.
it south? Is it southeast? Is it here? Is it? Um, and so it's been challenging, I think, because the we own our backyard, but our backyard is really small. So to have that influence grow, but I've just always just kind of kept my head down and done the best job I can and continue to grow and improve every day. And I think that's part of the reason why we're still here, 14 years later. Yes, I made a foray into the UK and tried selling my product there and retrenched after my first little stint there, and luckily missed the tariffs and all those problems. So, but the Renaissance, I think kind of of distilling, as I would dare to say, it's reached its peak, and there's some settling that's going to occur over the next few years, for sure.
And it's notable that's happening not just with the craft distilleries here in the US. We're starting to see As of this recording, within the past week or two, we've got Kentucky Owl going and Stoli US going under, Waterford Distillery in Ireland, and a number of craft distilleries here in the US. So I agree with you. It seems like the peak has been reached, and yeah, market correction is going to start to happen. Which that was going to be my next question. Where do you feel differently about the trends in the craft liquor industry now than you did in 2010?
Um, yeah, I really do. There was a bit of a wave that a lot of people got to ride on the way into the shore, and I think it's going to be a little tough as the wave rolls back out to see who can hang around and catch the next wave.
So before we go further into the origin, the first couple of years for Rocktown, I want to just ask about Arkansas as a state and as a distilling state. What did or what does Arkansas distilling history look like?
There's very little written down at all about Arkansas distilling history. Um, and what there is the coopering industry was big here. Um, there were a lot of stave mills in Arkansas, and one of the Arkansas senators and the U.S. senator, I think it was McClellan, or it might have been Wilbur Mills, I can't remember, was part of the instrumental regulation to make new charred oak barrels be required for the bourbon um, standard of identity. And because of the coopering industry in Arkansas and that being such a big part of the business, the economy at that particular time, because barrels back then, they could be tight for liquid or they could be loose for carrying, nails or what have you. So they did both tight and loose, and it was big for Arkansas. So that's pretty much all I've really been able to find or discern beyond just the random moonshiner here or there that might have had a territory at a particular time in Arkansas that they serviced, but not a whole lot of distilling history, which is in my mind kind of wild because we're not too geographically different from Tennessee and or Kentucky in that we're at approximately the same latitude as Lynchburg, Tennessee. We get a lot of the hotter summers and the cooler winters. We have a lot of the low pressure systems that go through. Um, we have springs and sources of clean water, which, you know, was a big deal back in the 1800s. Not such a big deal now having clean water, but having a good water source was very important. Um, and so that's why you have those distilleries in the Lynchburgs and the Bardstowns and those types of places where there was spring water available. Um, but for whatever reason, it didn't really happen here. Whether it was too firmly in the Bible Belt or what. But I mean, look at it. Still Arkansas, almost half our counties are still dry. So you say prohibition is over, but not
No, not
not
so
some
much.
places. Yeah, right.
I was going to ask about that too. That was also in that Big Blend Radio interview. That, and I was thinking that interview was done in 2019, where you said 50% of them were still dry, and COVID seemed to change things in a lot of counties around the country, especially in states that were more mixed, wet or dry, just because you
Mhm.
had direct to consumer, you had in-state shipping in some cases, but it sounds like from what you're saying, it's still about 50% dry.
Yeah, every major election, there might be one or two counties that manage to get the petitions signed and get it on the ballot. But at that rate, it'll be quite a few years before we're Um, totally wet. Yeah, for sure.
So as you're jumping back to the not the present, but to when you were founding Rocktown, you've already mentioned there were a couple of inspirations that you looked at. Again, Tuttletown and Dry Fly in particular, and a little bit later, Dave Pickerel. Uh, as you were getting started, I wanted to ask, this is another semi-deep question, I'm just warning you.
Mhm.
As you were entering it and thinking about it in 2008, 2009, formalizing in 2010, did you enter the distilling business feeling any kind of responsibility as the quote unquote first since distillery?
Ooh, yeah. It was very exciting to be the first one, but again, it was very trailblazing, to use that term again. But there was not a whole lot of information or um, way to find someone to follow. Nowadays you can go online and read all kinds of stuff. You can buy all kinds of books about distilling, and there's all this information available. But 2008, 2009, there's nothing. Only thing you can read about fermentation is a beer book,
Mhm.
how to make beer, which is important. You got to know how to make beer to make whiskey. So, but nothing about, you know, how to get corn to ferment and what you need to do and all those sorts of things. And so it was, I think, very challenging at that time to be the first and find out all the things that have to be done um, without, somebody to call necessarily to tell you what needed to be done. So.
So, so in addition to those other inspirations, I mentioned Dave Pickerel came in. Uh, when did Dave enter the picture for you, and how did you get connected there?
So when I was at Altel, I did IT projects, and in the IT arena, when you're doing a project with IBM, you bring in the IBM consultants. You're doing a project with data power, XML security. You bring in the experts. You're doing a data migration from place to place, from one web server to another, and you're using a software. You bring in those experts. So I was well aware that with my limited knowledge of the actual um, physical part of distilling, yes, I understood the theory. I've got a degree in engineering. I, love the science, the chemistry, all that stuff. Actually doing it, setting it up, didn't really know. And I really wanted to go to the dry fly distilling school. They had a week-long thing you could go to, but it was booked out for months. I
Mhm.
didn't have that kind of time. So the other thing I learned as an IT guy is, you always get three quotes, right? So I reached out to Holstein, got a quote from them. Reached out to Carl, got a quote for a still from them. These are still manufacturers: Holstein, Carl, and then Vendome. And reached out to Vendome, and Holstein and Carl offered, and Kotha, which was the other one. They had their own in-house consultants.
Mhm.
So they had people that would help you get this stuff started and make it run, right?
Right.
Where, I called up Rob Sherman over at Vendome, and he's like, yeah, we don't really do it like that. But there's this guy, you know, David Pickerel, that used to be the master distiller at Maker's Mark, and you should reach out to him. Here's his number. So I was like, master distiller Maker's Mark, it must be good. So I I went ahead and reached out to Dave, and we met the day after Thanksgiving in 2009. Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, 2009, in Rob Sherman's office. And that's when we discussed the vision, discussed what I wanted to do, and came up with a plan to, get Rocktown up and running. So, that's how I found Dave Pickerel. He was very, very new in the consulting business at that time. He'd only
Mhm.
done a couple of smaller distilleries. And yeah, it was really kind of he hadn't even started wearing his leather hat yet, you know. He was you know,
Very early
very,
days.
very early days,
Yeah.
yes. Um, so yeah, that's when we started decided to work together. And you know, the other thing you learn from IT and hiring consultants is they work when you pay them. They're not like free information. And
Sure.
like Dave's a great guy and all that, but you know, he was billing me by the hour. So, you
Of
know,
course.
it's one of those things, right?
Yeah. A rising tide lifts all boats, but someone's got to get paid. So,
That's
and
somebody has got to get paid.
yeah. And look, I know what you mean. It doesn't take away from anything he gave to the distillery to help, train you up and get you learning what you needed to know. Um, but yeah, no one does it for free. It'd be wonderful if
Yeah.
they did,
And
but
I wouldn't have expected him to either. But the challenge for me was I started the distillery way underfunded.
uh,
So, you know, it was one of those things, you know, swim or die, basically for me. And um, yeah, so
I've heard it
here we are, though. Yeah,
many times in the startup world, especially distilling, easiest way to make 1 million in distilling, start with 10 million.
that's right. Yeah, best way to make a small fortune is start with a large one. That's right.
Exactly. So, right from the beginning, with Dave alongside, you set out with the intention of using Arkansas grown or made product wherever possible. So, this is including not just the grain, but as you were saying, cooperage, um, bottles, if possible, packaging. So,
Mhm.
how, looking back to, 2009, 2010, how hard was that to achieve in the beginning?
It was crazy. So, you know, it's not like you can just like drive up to a farm and go, "Hey, I want to buy your corn." You know, it it was kind of wild to try to find where to source Arkansas corn from, where to get Arkansas soft red winter wheat from. How can I buy that? Is it whole? Is it fresh? Is it even any good? You know, does it have, you know, aflatoxins, or is it full of bugs, or, you know, all those kinds of things that, you know, you don't really know until you start diving into that. So yeah, it was very tricky at the beginning finding sources for the grain, and then you know I saw that there was a cooperage in Hot Springs, so I went down to meet with him. So that was pretty straightforward. And then there's a bottle manufacturer in Jonesboro, Arkansas. So for a while there, until they quit making liquor bottles. We were getting our liquor bottles from Jonesboro. Our boxes are made here in Arkansas and assembled by Lamb Packaging and Maumelle. So still trying to keep it as local as possible, being an Arkansas boy, Arkansas native, understanding the footprint that carbon footprint that we put out, and trying to keep shipping lanes as short as possible. Buying local just makes all the sense in the world to me. So
Understandable. And as you've as you've grown, you've gone through not just a major expansion, but a move in 2018 to a new 26,000 square foot facility. Uh, how how easy or difficult has it been to maintain that Arkansas grown and produced uh, since then?
you know, we don't use the Arkansas cooperage anymore because he specializes in small barrels. So he doesn't want to make really anything above a 15. He made me some 20s a couple years ago, but he's just not really set up for big barrels for full size. Um, So we get our barrels from Kelvin in Louisville, Kentucky, but they were still using the Arkansas grains. But um, we tried to grow Arkansas barley and do a single malt and malt it ourselves one year, and that failed miserably. So, the path to being here 14 years is paved with failure, and I can definitely got the scars to prove it. But I've tried as much as I can within practical reasons to keep it all local for sure.
It just made me think a number of producers and distilleries that have come on the podcast have a variation on wall of mistakes, wall of shame, wall of pride of what you've tried. There are a lot of different angles you can look at it from. If when you have a product that you make that just didn't work, do you keep a bottle of that around or sample of that around to kind of mark that, all right, we tried this, didn't work, but we still did it?
Yeah, right. We had some early batches that were, subpar and that we wish we had never put in the bottle, but yeah, we have those up on the shelf we call the it's in our room we call antiquities, which is all the old stuff. I've got the original bottle filling machine and all the first batches of different products. All on a wall. I need to find a way to display it somehow, but right now it's just in a back room in the offices. But yeah, we remember those things and are better because of it for sure.
if uh if you're up in New York City, next time you are, visit Kings County. In my personal opinion, just my opinion, they have my favorite wall like that. It's right
Hmm.
there, you can't miss it, and it's very prominent. And to me, it's just kind of, it means something that you're just owning. All right, this is our early stuff, this is the stuff that didn't work, but God, have we tried all of these
Yeah,
different things to make it work.
right,
uh,
right.
After
That's
14
good.
years, it's a mark of pride. Like, we've been able to try all these things because we've been around so long and we've
Hmm.
got access to these materials. uh,
Absolutely. Yep.
so uh, let's see, two directions. All right. You probably heard this in other interviews I've done too. I often have two directions I want to go after a question, but I'll go this way. Because I feel like it fits with what you're saying right now. On a couple of pages on the website, particularly in product descriptions, there's a line that gets repeated, which is, "We're makers, not fakers."
Yeah.
And this is the type of line that I read, and I'm like, on one hand, it's meant to make a point for sure. Like, we're making this stuff, it's distilled here, it's aged here, with the exception, we'll get the Bardstown collaboration, distilled in Kentucky, but still aged
Hmm.
there, and it's your mash bill and all of that. So, so on one hand, it's meant to make that point, but also that kind of line always to me feels like you had someone in mind when you were writing it. So, I don't do gotcha questions, so I'm not going to force you on anything. But was there like maybe a category or even a distillery in particular that you were thinking of when writing that, or is it just a general statement that you wanted to make?
Well, I don't know. That actually comes from back when I was making my foray into the UK, and there is a YouTube reviewer over there named Ralphie. Are you
Mm.
familiar with Ralphie?
Uh, Name sounds familiar. I'm sure I.
He's
I'm sure I
got,
would.
the hat on, and he's just Scottish guy, and sitting there and reviews whiskeys, and he's very colorful and interesting to watch. And we were talking about that, makers not fakers. He doesn't do interviews, he just does reviews. He doesn't take samples, he buys the product, and he gives you his honest opinion. And he had heard me, or I can't exactly remember where it came up, but he said, yeah, makers not fakers, you should use that or whatever. And I was like, done, you know. But I'm not going to use their names, but I chose to make my whiskey from day one, drop one. Every drop's been distilled in Little Rock until we did the Bardstown collaboration. And there was another distillery that started up that decided to buy MGP and start bottling it and became enormous. Everybody was chasing their bottles. Everybody was looking for these bottles. And I was just like, it's just MGP, y'all. Come on. It's
Mhm.
good whiskey, but there's plenty of it. No need to chase, you know? And then they later get, the big payday and get acquired by a much larger international company. And it's just like, where's, okay, sure. I got those same samples they did from MGP, working with the same dead gum consultant. And I said, no, thanks. I want to make it myself. That's why I'm doing this. That's the joy and the creativity and why I've got so many different mash bills and so many different things I do. So, while, they were more forthcoming that they didn't make it anyway. They, it wasn't that they were faking that they had made it, but there were several others that remain nameless that you had to dig pretty deep to figure out that it wasn't theirs.
Mhm.
Um, and one of them even had a class action lawsuit and lost it and the whole thing. But yeah, so it's just kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to say, hey, man, you know, you're out there, you know who you are.
Hey, I like it. So with that, I want to put a pin in that thread just for the moment because I do want to come back next to your production and where you are. But I want to jump back just one more time into your history because it's another area where I think where makers not fakers can be production, but it can also be blazing that trail and leading the community. And one of the things that you have been excellent as individually as a company is working with the Arkansas legislature and getting on multiple occasions, at least three that I've heard, legislation to change regulations that make the environment more favorable to you as a distiller. This is selling directly to the public, allowing to sell by the bottle, allowing to sell by the drink. Um, when you start the distillery, you think about it, 2009. You started in 2010. How quickly did you realize? All right, there's some legislation that we need to work on if we're going to succeed here.
Yeah, it was pretty much immediately. So, yeah, 2009, get going. Still arrives June of 2010. We're distilling in July. Um, Bottle our first batch late August. And then we start doing, having a tasting room and doing tours and that sort of thing. And it's like, okay, here's a list of liquor stores where you can go buy the product. I'm sorry, I can't sell it to you.
Mm.
And that obviously is not a very strong business strategy right there. So I realized immediately that, well, we've got to see if we can get this changed. And so that's when I worked with the ABC and talked to them, and they had some changes coming through in 2011, and we could piggyback in those changes. And granted, I'm the only distillery in Arkansas. Well, there's another one that started right after I did that just was a moonshine guy, and he wasn't in the capital city. He was, about 3 hours away. So he wasn't involved in that at all. But I, you know, said, we got to be able to sell it by the bottle. And so we got it in there to where we could sell an unlimited amount of bottles 7 days a week. And that's really how we were able to keep our doors open for the next 5 years for sure.
Now, again, I don't want to give you a gotcha question or put you in a position of biting the hand that allows you to sell. Uh, I'm curious to just hear what your experience has been over the years making these changes and advocating for these changes with the Arkansas legislature.
Well, surprisingly so, they've been incredible to work with and very open to the changes and had very little opposition. You know, we've gotten the standard two or three no votes in, the General Assembly, just because they vote no on anything that has to do with alcohol or anything like that. But it was it was really very good to work with them. Couldn't don't have anything, you know, but nice things to say about it.
Good to hear. Good to hear. All right. So, with that portion, let's jump back into that production. As you mentioned earlier, you have and have had a lot of different products and releases over the years. And just for the sake of time and who's listening, I know we're going to be focusing mainly on the whiskeys. I do want to just shout out that you've had the vodka, as you said, from nearly the beginning. You've had some gin that's made with a vacuum still. So these are definitely things that if you like those spirits, it's worth checking out. With the whiskey, I mean, just right now, if you listening to this, you pause and you go to the Rock Town website, you've got the Arkansas Straight Bourbon, Rice Bourbon, La Harpe Low Rye Bourbon, Peated Bourbon, Barley, Chocolate Malt, Golden Promise Bourbon, 4-grain Sour Mash, Rye, and a couple of finishes. So you've got quite a list going on right there. And so I'm curious, as you are still, are how how do I want to ask this question? How often are you thinking about a new mash bill, a new grain to throw in there, and how often do you get to try that?
Um, I've kind of settled down a little bit on the mash bill side of things, and done more experimenting with finishes lately because that seems to be all the rage. But it's really just inspiration from, being a whiskey geek and reading and listening to podcasts and following other distilleries and what's going on, and not just the United States, but in Scotland and Ireland and Japan and Tasmania and all over the world, and how they're doing things, and what could I glean from that in order to make something different and special and unique, and you know why can't I just try that too. So that's kind of the reason, and that's where the inspiration comes from. And new mash bills, I think we've kind of settled in on our standard set. I don't know that we've introduced a new mash bill recently, but if I come across something, I'll work it in the schedule. That's just the way it goes.
Benefit of being founder and distiller, you want to try something, you get to do it.
Yeah, right.
So that core mash bill, it's the bourbon mash bill is 82 corn, 9 soft red winter wheat, 9 malted barley.
Right.
And through the products that we mentioned, the 9% can get swapped out for different toastings on the barley, different flavoring grains from the wheat. That's the core framework that you're working with for the bourbons. Then you've
Hmm.
got the La Harpe Low Rye Bourbon, which is wow, it just went right out of my notes. I'm sorry about that. It the 75 corn, 12% rye, and 13% malted barley. So that's pretty close to let's say, a classic, if you will, Kentucky bourbon mash bill.
Right.
I am curious if anyone gets confused because it's a low rye bourbon, which it definitely is, but it's higher rye than your normal bourbon. But I mean, your normal bourbon is 0% rye.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So yeah, it's low rye in bourbon parlance when there is rye in the mash bill. Yes.
um, I
So
did I did quite enjoy that. I tried to taste as possible. I should mention here, Phil was extremely generous in sharing product with me for tasting purposes, for reviewing purposes for this interview. So really, thank you for that. And because of that, I got to really try a variety of what you're doing at Rocktown.
right.
Several
That
of the
was
ones I
my
mentioned.
intention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got to try let's say the straight bourbon next to La Harpe. And what is that like? The straight bourbon next to the rice bourbon, and then next to a the bourbon finished the 14th anniversary bottling. So it's at a higher proof and finished in Sauterne casks.
Right.
So I love that. Obviously, this was incredibly generous, but it's also worth noting it's incredibly valuable. And I think this, as you said, this was your intention, is getting to try not only the core product but also what you do as you branch off from that
Mhm.
is so interesting and important for understanding your thought process of how you are building a brand and building out these branches. Because if I were to try, let's say, I try La Harpe as the first and only product that I try from you, that's going to be what I think of as that's
Right.
Rocktown's core profile. And while it
Mhm.
is a core product, it's not your core profile. So that's why it's so important. And so thank you for being generous and sharing that. It's a lot of fun too.
No, thanks. Yeah, I think it is. That,
Yeah,
that that's what it's all about is having fun.
exactly. And so jumping into the production, along with the "we're makers not fakers," you have also talked about how there are things within production that really set you apart: proofing, distillation temperatures, filtration. To throw a very big question, or very broad question at you on this, can you go into what you do with each of these levers to set Rocktown apart?
Oh, geez. Early on, early days, we used the scientific method and, you know, took a multivariable equation and changed individual variables in order to achieve something that could be palatable in those early days. But it was really about trial and error, or, and reading and learning about fermentation temperatures, distillation techniques. Dave early on thought we should be able to, with pumped reflux, strip and distill to a finished product in one run. And with our Vendome hybrid pot still. And after trying that for a while, I was like, there's no way this is going to work. You're pumping good spirit on top of bad and trying to make your cuts. And I didn't think I could make it work. So, we settled on doing stripping runs in the traditional kind of Scottish way, where you take a mash, we ferment on the grain, and then strip all the alcohol out of it, just quick and rough, and then bring it back to the still and then redistill it in a traditional manner, making a very conservative heads and tails cut to keep just the sweet, good part of the whiskey, and then putting that in the barrel to age at a reasonably low proof to absorb the wood sugars, and in a number 4 char barrel to try to achieve a great tasting whiskey by design in a shorter amount of time than you might need to take if you were a little bit rougher and took a little less care and just my cat's on the toy piano.
Oh.
Dave, get off of that. Um, then you might otherwise. So everything's been designed and tested and developed to create the best product we possibly could. And from experimenting with the yeast to fermentation temperatures to um, everything. It's all been, planned out, so to speak.
You said,
Does that answer the question?
yeah, yeah. We'll
Okay.
dive a little deeper into it. And you said earlier you're on the same kind of latitude, you know, as Tennessee. It's not too far removed from the climates of Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, what we think of as core bourbon whiskey territory.
Right.
Um, the For me, just looking at it from a very broad view, the biggest differences are simply that one, you're in the city, so you're distilling in a metro area, which some distilleries are in those two other states, but not a lot. And also that you're right on the river, on the Arkansas River. So, with all of that in mind, what does maturation look like in Little Rock? Because it seems like it allows you to go a little bit faster and
It
age it.
does. It does. We get the extremes, um, the very hot summers and the cooler winters, which is great. We don't climate control our warehouse. And the other thing that people don't really think about, but I alluded to it earlier, was these low pressure systems that come up from the Gulf of Mexico through Arkansas really do have an effect on the whiskey as well. You can smell the whiskey breathing, the barrels breathing as a high pressure, low pressure transition is occurring. And it's amazing to see that it's not only temperature, but barometric pressure also has a lot to do with it. And we've used temperature recorders in our warehouse to record the temperature. And, you have those daily swings of 20 degrees, 30 degrees. But then from the lowest of the low, which was right around zero, to the highest of the high, which was about 110, 105 degrees Fahrenheit, that is how to achieve a great tasting bourbon. And I think we're set up geographically to be able to do that incredibly well.
And to just clarify one thing on the maturation side as well, you said the original cooperage you were working with, he was set up more for the smaller barrels, 15s, occasional 20s. From what you said, and also the background, this audio only, but still your background is full size 53-gallon barrels. Uh, when did that transition take place?
Well, we are still in two barrel sizes today. We do 25-gallon barrels, which are basically a half a barrel, and 53-gallon or standard size barrels. So the 25s, we've gradually decreased our usage of and increased the 53s. Our 4-year bottled in bond is always in a 53-gallon barrel, but our small batch is in a 25-gallon barrel. But I really get great results out of the 25s. Yes, it's more expensive per gallon of liquid in the barrel, but I can't argue with the results. And so, yeah, we continue to use the 25s, but more and more it's 53s and, going longer and longer. And people are always like, well, don't you have something like age 10 years already? And it's like, you know, I'm in the business of making whiskey to be sold, not just to keep it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there is a little bit of strategy, but if you look back at you know, some of the other whiskeys that they had a 5 year, and then they had a 7 year, and then they had a 10 year, and then they had a 12 year. That's not because they planned for it. It's because they couldn't sell it all when it was 5 years old.
Mm.
So that's kind of my response to that is being a businessman. Every one of those little barrels is a little piggy bank. And if I can get my results out of that piggy bank before the Angels take their share, um, in greater amounts, the longer you go, then the better off I am. So
Yeah, fair point. And again, in tasting all six of the expressions that I got to taste, I think if I'm looking back in my notes, there was only one that I was like, this is good, but like just needs a little bit more time. Everything else was, I think, between 30 months or so and for 4 to 4 or 5 years, not terribly old, not like fresh out of the barrel kind of thing, fresh off the still either. All the notes
right.
they were definitely matured.
Yeah.
And that is kind of a rare thing because you can putting aside the smaller barrels for the most part, just because that obviously is another variable that throws off the aging timeline a bit. So just looking at the 53s, if you can get a good product out of a 53 in 2.5 years, 2.5 years, that not only is saying something about the spirit going in, but also the environment you're in that you're able to do that. There are plenty of places farther north who don't get as much temperature and barometric pressure variation that
Right.
they can have great stuff going in the barrel, but a 2.5 is just not done. It's just not
No.
ready yet.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yep.
But yeah, it's um the thing you mentioned there that's of utmost importance is the care that went into the liquid before it goes into the barrel. You can't stress that enough, that it has to be taken care of on the front end if you want it to be good on the back end, for sure.
Yeah. Barrels don't fix things or hide them.
No, they sure don't.
And so as your production has grown, you've gone into mostly bigger barrels. You've expanded not only your initial footprint, but also adding distillation production in Kentucky with the Bardstown Bourbon Company collaborative collaborative distilling program. Sorry, blanked on the name for a second.
Yeah, right.
Um, so this was really interesting to me because, as per a timeline from another podcast, so you were looking in March 2020. So this is right when COVID hit. March 2020, you started on a search to find a partner that could help you expand your production. Now you
Hmm.
ended up with Bardstown, which they've been on in multiple capacities on the podcast. They're good friends, and they really, I think, changed the game in terms of contract distilling and capacity building for
Right.
smaller brands. And so, what was it like searching right when that pandemic hit, and how did that get you to Bardstown?
Well, the search actually happened before the pandemic. My first batch at Bardstown, we were putting barrels in the rick house on March 17th, 2020.
Oof.
So I was in Bardstown, Kentucky at the Hampton Inn when everything got locked down and there was nowhere to go get anything to eat, and could only get takeout from the La Herradura across the way there. And yeah, it was kind of nuts, but you know, I'd always kind of dreamed of having a bigger distillery and a column still of my own, but I didn't have the capital to do that. And so the collaborative distilling program that they went to market with really just fit exactly what I needed. And I don't think I really looked anywhere else. I mean, it was like, that works. That's great. Yes, these people are amazing. I want to work with them, you know?
Mm.
And it's been so we produced there in 2020, 2021, and 2022, skipped 23, and just went back there last month to start up again. So yeah, it's been amazing because they allowed me to do what I wanted to do, which was to keep making Arkansas bourbon, but just use their kitchen to make it in. And took our corn, our wheat, used our yeast, our cooking technique, and distilled it and brought it back here to age. So yeah,
So the number one question I have to ask is
number one.
number one. And this is always good whenever talk contract selling, even though, as you said, it's your mash bill, it's your product. The grains are getting shipped up from Arkansas to Kentucky, up and over, I should say. Is there any expectation, or have you found that there's a difference in taste between distillate from what you've made at Bardstown and what you make in Little Rock?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, so when you're distilling in a 45-foot tall column still is 36 inches around at, you know, 45 gallons a minute versus a 250-gallon copper pot still that's maybe 14 feet tall. Yeah, there's going to be flavor profile differences.
Yep. I
It's
know I
science,
know
my
it's a
friend.
softball. I know
Yeah, right.
it's in some ways a softball, but I mean it does set up the question. If you want this expanded production capacity, which they definitely provide, and you've gotten, uh, have you had to either explain or change marketing in any way to tell people, all right, we've got this that was distilled here, this that was distilled there, both our products. There's going to be some difference, but you're going to like both of these.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we actually created a completely separate product line that we call our column still collection. So they are the ones that are distilled in Bardstown on a column still, thus the name column still collection. And yeah, different flavor profiles. We've got a regular wheated bourbon, a toasted French oak, and a single barrel version. Basically, three products in the product line initially upon launch, and but still, delicious bourbon. So that's the goal, always, right?
Of course, you start distilling with them. You're filling those first barrels March 17th of 2020. Um, I think this is also an inevitable softball question, but how did COVID alter your plans for production, expansion, or just plans for the distillery as a whole?
Well, we couldn't operate our cocktail bar that we operate in downtown Little Rock, and we shifted gears and made hand sanitizer. And so, while we were very fortunate to have a very good position in the off-premise or the liquor stores, to where we didn't lose a whole lot of business because the bars were all closed. We actually fared, fairly well through COVID, and I was able to keep all my employees employed and busy during that time. So it was, great for us from that perspective, but I had made that investment and the commitment to work with, Bardstown. And so that was the horse that I was going to ride for expanding production for sure.
All right. As so as you're, and the reason I asked that too is because it's timeline wise, it's 2020. Just 2 years prior, you had moved into that larger space. Um, I did actually want to ask one thing about that new space. So when you initially started, you were in the South Main district, right?
I was on East 6th Street when I first started. Then I
He's
moved to South
moved to
Main.
South Main. Okay. So the South Main or Soma district.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right.
I think even as late as 2018, when you moved there, it was considered kind of empty, not a ton going on there. Um, Obviously, we've had a pandemic since then, so things kind of might have ended up a little differently, but it does seem more bustling now,
It
just in
is.
terms of
Yeah.
looking at the businesses that are there, and as much
Right.
as I can see foot traffic from sources and stuff. So, how has the distillery fit into this new space? But literally, but also how does it fit in as a business? And do you get a lot of cross traffic?
Yeah, it's actually been incredible for us. 2017, I changed the law and got the ability to sell by the drink at the distillery. Prior to that, you could give samples and sell bottles, but you couldn't have a cocktail. And so I went to the legislature again, got that law changed. So 2017, the law has changed. 2018, I moved into a facility that's large enough to where I could actually put a proper cocktail bar, a craft cocktail bar in. We're not a restaurant. We don't have food. It's cocktails and salty snacks if you need something. Um, and we don't have live music. It's just a nice chill spot where you can go in and actually have a conversation with whoever you're there with. The music's not blaring. Um, and you get some of the best cocktails in Little Rock, I think. And we've won several awards for our cocktails in the local newspapers. Um, but yeah, 2018, Soma was still trying to kind of figure itself out. And we moved in, opened the cocktail bar that began drawing a lot of traffic. One of the food trucks that we used to have in the parking lot got a space across the street from us, El Sur. So they're open. There's another restaurant now next to them called Mockingbird, and one next to them, a sushi spot came in, and then down the street, you've got BCW, Bread, Cheese, Wine, and The Root, and you've got the bagel place across the street, and Community Bakery on the corner across from us. That great coffee shop, cookies, pastries, all that good stuff. Um, so it's really become a entity kind of its own, and a place where new retailers and um, art galleries and other bars have opened that really has become a great part of the nightlife and scene here in Little Rock.
So as of last year, if not a little bit earlier, you're officially in the American Craft Spirits Association's large craft distillery category. This is so that
How do you
is.
know that?
Oh, I saw every interview you've done, sir. Um,
That's what I was
so
afraid of.
yeah, uh, so that means, just for folks playing at home, that means you're now releasing more than 50,000 9 liters, so 6 bottle, 750 cases per year. Uh, in moving up in this category, again, not knowing the answer to this, what does that mean for you as a distillery in terms of the ACSA? What does moving categories do?
It doesn't really do anything except it, changes where my answers go in the craft spirits data project, that they do every year. I'm still a craft distillery, by in all sense of the word, but we've been very fortunate in the markets outside of Arkansas that we're in, that we've grown our footprint and been able to maintain those sales over the years and continue to grow, coupled with our cocktail bar and our strong Arkansas market to yeah, be up there with the largest of the category of craft distilling. Yes.
And that goes back to something you said towards the beginning of this episode, which was you own your backyard. You've been around long enough to predate the online sales, places like Sealbox, Big Thirsts, and who have, in one way, they've expanded the map tremendously for
Right.
smaller producers, but also means, if you can sell to 43 states, that's great, but also means you need to be able to respond to inquiries in 43 states and,
Mhm.
put boots on the ground in some other ones. So there's kind of a double-edged sword to that. Uh, what advantage has it given you, do you think, to, or disadvantage for that matter, to being able to own your backyard first and then expand?
Well, I wish that it had happened that way. I think it was kind of a dual path for me. I didn't really own it first and then expand. I was early enough in the craft distilling movement, as we've already discussed, that some markets reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm a distributor in XYZ. We'd love to have your product. Are you interested?" That sort of thing. So I had that going on while I was working on, the Arkansas market, and had challenges with the three-tier system in Arkansas, and made some changes around 2015 that were instrumental in us growing our local presence to the point to where it is now. But yeah, it wasn't easy early on. None of this is easy for sure.
No, not one guest. This is, I think I think the episode number is going to be in the high 160s, if not 170. I think 168. Uh, so in all those guests, not one person has ever said, "Yeah, this was really easy to do." So,
Yeah.
in a way, that's good. Glad to hear that that's still the case. But you made it through. Um, with this growth, are you still growing in terms of production, at least? Let's say.
Well, like I said, we went back to Bardstown again this year, and continuing to make that investment in whiskey production that, will be here probably long after I'm gone. But yeah, it's we continue to grow and like we opened the Colorado market for the first time this year, so that was new to us. We've got Nashville opening up in February. So yeah, we continue to move and continue to grow, hopefully, you know, in an intelligent way, not trying to spread ourselves too thin while we go deep where we already are. We're spreading out slowly as well.
And so, as we're wrapping up, and of course, there's so many things that, as always, that could ask more about and go further into. There will be notes about the products I got to try, so you can, so listeners, you can read those and hear more about them. I want to, keep looking to the future for you. So one of the products that I mentioned earlier that I got to try was that 14th anniversary bottling. So and it was delicious. It was at 54.1%, so 108.2 proof, finished in Sauterne casks. The whiskey came straight through. The Sauterne was nice. It was balanced, and I know Sauterne and those wines and finishing, as you, in your own words, you said finishing's been a thing now for a couple of years, and most people still don't do it right because, um,
Yeah.
if you finish so much that I kind of put the line at, if you can't taste the whiskey anymore, it's it's too
Hmm.
finished.
Right.
So this was very well balanced in that the whiskey was there. Having tried the core products that it was based on, I knew what to look for and could appreciate that a little more as well. And it's worth noting, a couple of my patrons and friends who I shared this bottle with and got to try it uh, said immediately, it's like, where can I get this bottle? Because
Nice.
it's
Nice.
it's just
Yeah.
that good. And that's something that I love to tell guests when that happens, because it's
Yeah.
not everything's everyone's cup of tea, but when something comes along that's like that, you know props to props to the producers on that.
Yeah, well, thanks. Thanks. That's awesome.
Yeah. So with the 14th anniversary bottling underway, or done, I should say, your 15th year about to start, um, what is on the near horizon for Rocktown?
Near horizon. Well, we're about to turn 15, and so I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do for that 15th anniversary whiskey. And I've got a lot of possibilities. I've got a lot of got some different mash bills that are 5 years and over. Um, so I'm looking at that, and then, again, potentially trying to do a finish with that. But yeah, we yeah, I've got a lot of possibilities because I make a lot of different mash bills and a lot of different things, and I'm not gonna, pin myself down just yet. We've got a whole summer to get through before we celebrate our 15th next October. So, but yeah, the wheels are turning. But what we've decided to do this last round at Bardstown Bourbon Company is, instead of doing our standard wheated mash bill, we are going in heavy on the Arkansas rice bourbon, which is something completely unique. And the Arkansas is the largest rice producing state in the union, so it's important economically for the state of Arkansas, and we all kind of identify with rice here. So and I've made it now. I think I'm on my third batch that we've bottled, all at about 30 months, a little over. And this, we're stocking back quantities of it that we made at Bardstown for, you know, a long time to come.
What, if anything, keeps you up at night about the distillery?
Dude, I can't even tell you all that stuff. You kidding me?
Yeah, I'm
You
sorry.
know,
Have to ask.
um, it's just it's all the small business stuff, the whether you're operating a manufacturing company making widgets or anything else, you've got all those concerns from, you know, banking to people to, you know, quality to supply chain to you name it, all the hats, all the hats. And as a small company, we've got 26 employees, 25, 26. Um, it never ceases the things you can get surprised with. That's for sure.
Very true. And if I obviously don't know what it's like to be in that position, but the one thing I can say again after talking to so many distilleries is if you made it through the COVID shortages of glass, of product lines, of shipping, supply chain, all of that, and came out standing, you're in a better position to at least anticipate and prepare yourself for anything like that again. Hopefully, knock wood, it doesn't. But you
Yeah,
survived
right.
that, so
We don't want that to happen again, but
no,
yeah.
no. Um, Second to last question for you is: I know we've said multiple times you have a lot of ideas. What are there any products or ideas that are on your like bucket list that you have to try to make before you retire or we're done here?
I'm looking back here at my bar. You can't see it because I've got my barrel house as my back. But I don't know, I've um on the bucket list of products to make. Um, it's I've been very fortunate to where I've been able to make a lot of different things that I've wanted to make, everything from a peated single malt to a standard single malt to, the Sauternes finished a single malt to the 14th anniversary Sauterne finished bourbon, um, and the bottled and bond. We were one of the first craft distilleries to make a bottled and bond in 2015. Um, so I've always been really big on the Bruichladdich, and then what Mark Rainier took over to Waterford, although Waterford has since been placed in receivership. But this
Mhm.
idea of terroir and where the grains come from affecting the flavor, and I think that's really interesting. And I guess if I had $1 zillion, I would, contract with farmers and with different plots of land and grow corn you know, in the Delta region of Arkansas and in the Arkansas River Valley and in the maybe in the Ozarks and see how three different plots of corn in three different climates and parts of Arkansas could potentially affect the flavor of a bourbon down the road. And I find that stuff very interesting. One of the things I really wanted to do early on that I tried and I failed at, that I think if I tried it again, I might be able to get it better, is this idea of growing Arkansas barley and then floor malting it. But again, I don't have $1 zillion, so I'm not doing that one. Um, and so those are two of the things that would, I guess, be on my bucket list that if if I could really do that and do it well, I think it'd be super cool. For me anyway. I don't know if I could actually sell any of it or not.
I mean, this doesn't really help you. I'd buy a bottle of each of those just as I also love the idea. Waterford was on the podcast. They've been an inspiration for many a question over the
Right.
years.
Yeah.
Um, for Claudia, I'm trying to get on the podcast, so I agree with you that ethos, that methodology, is exciting.
Yeah, it really
It's
is.
fun to
And
try.
you know, I trying to do everything with Arkansas grains I possibly can, but then to take it even, further to the degree that what plot of land it's coming from,
Yeah.
um, is and not just knowing which plot of land it comes from, but the next batch is from a different plot of land, and is there differences, um, is incredibly interesting, I think, in the world of whiskey, and definitely could be explored more in the bourbon realm, I believe.
And with that, in our last few minutes, I'll ask you my last question, which is, what legacy do you want to leave behind personally and for the distillery?
The legacy I want to leave behind. Oh gosh, that's what defines a legacy.
Well, like I said, so we got personal side and the distillery. So let's start with when and some people decide they're not going to retire. They're just going to be at the distillery till the day they drop. But for whenever the day comes that you are no longer at the distillery by
Mm,
choice or not by choice, um, what on that side, what do you want to leave as something that people are always going to look back and say, Phil Brandon, started this distillery. He made these choices for us and we want to follow them or honor them. And then for the distillery side, it's looking a little bit more broadly in terms of what is or what do you want Rocktown's legacy to be? And that could be in the landscape of Arkansas, of national craft movement, however you want to interpret that.
yeah, I think, the distillery in Arkansas has been instrumental in so many ways, and I do so many other things. In the Soma area, I'm president of the board for the Soma 501(c)(3) foundation that promotes the Soma district. Worked really hard on that. So I think, that Rocktown is Arkansas, and is always going to be for Arkansas, and has it's incredible how many people have come through our doors and later tell me how much it means to them to have Rocktown here, and what a great thing it is for the state. And I hope the legacy is that Rocktown can continue that, until the end of time. My personal legacy, I don't fathom to know. I've just continued to work hard and do the best thing I possibly can every single day, and hopefully one day, when it comes time to retire, that means something.
All right. I like it. With that, Phil Brandon, Rocktown Distillery, founder, distiller, ideator, all of the above, and the many hats that you wear within those. Thank you so much for coming on, for sharing the product, for taking time out to talk to me about all things Arkansas distilling, Little Rock, and Rocktown. It's really been a pleasure. Hang on with me for just a minute after we finish the recording. This has been another episode of the Whiskering Podcast. Thank you all for listening. As always, listen to the end roll to hear where you can find show notes. There'll be links to Rocktown in the episode show notes as well. And please do try them. And you'll see my notes. I can't recommend them enough. So thank you all for listening. I'll see you all next week.
Thanks, David.